Welcome, Weekend Warriors, to the Week 6 edition of the podcast. The commish is back. What an eventful week last week. It is Vikings week. For you guys, it's Eagles week. Yes, I'm going to the Vikings game in Minnesota this week. Very excited for it. Just so happens they're playing the Eagles. Me and Dee wanted to go for Columbus Day because she's got some time off for school, and of course, we look at the schedule and they're playing the Birds. So I think we can all agree it's going to be hopefully a close game, and hopefully the Vikings come out on top. But, last week, I don't know if I would have said that after all the Diggs turmoil. I think hopefully some of that has subsided. Who knows, man? Like he said, I want to be in Minnesota. So we'll see. But anyway, I want to get this podcast out a little early. It's Wednesday here. Going to do a recap of last week. Some news. The Turnersville Sportsbook. Let me give you a little timeout. I got to get my little paperwork here. The Turnersville Sportsbook was 2-3 last week for the second consecutive week. Not very good, but still 18-7 on the year. So where do we go wrong? Well, we did say that Brett was going to take down Jake, and unfortunately, Odell Beckham Jr. got outscored by Jarvis Landry. The fumble at the end of the game didn't help, and Jake was able to take down Brett in that matchup. I did successfully pick Dean to beat Pearson. That was a very close game, but Baker Mayfield scored -4 points. So Pearson's wheel of quarterbacks after losing Breeze and unable to make a trade has come back to bite him a little bit. Kevin and Otley. Kev with the upset special over Ott on the backs of Josh Jacobs against the Bears with 3 touchdowns in a big game. There's a lot of crazy stuff in that one, so I'm sure Kev and Ott have exchanged some text messages since that game. 2 big rivals there. And then Zach took down Terry, even though Terry had 1,000,000 points from Will Fuller. Zach countered it with 1,000,001 points from DJ Chark. And, just put up a whopping amount of points, 184 to, I think, Terry like 150 or so. So, big week for Zach. I was incorrect in that matchup and the previous matchup. I predicted Ockley to win. And then I did get my own matchup right. Chris, I was up a lot going into Sunday night. He didn't get very many points from Mahomes, but then I got to tell you, Monday night I was tightening up as I watched Breida Filter run down the field 80 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, I think, the first 6 minutes, but I was able to hang on. He didn't do much after that. So, 2-3. That's a Week 6 recap. Everybody in the league now has a win. My dad was able to leapfrog Chris in the standings, having more points than him. Chris is now in the basement. Dean has moved into 9th place. And the Harding brothers at the top. Jake with the most points scored for the season, and he's at 4-1. Me with considerable less points scored on the season, but also at 4-1. And then 3 teams at 3-2 and 3 teams at 2-3. So tight standings. It's early in the season, so a lot could happen between now and then. But let's move on to Week 6. So my predictions. I have first matchup on the docket is Chris versus Brett. And Chris, last week was playing a little bit of hoping Saquon would come back. He's already ruled out this week. Right now he has 2 San Francisco running backs in his lineup. That would have worked out great last week with Coleman and Breida. So he's got them in this week. They're playing the Rams, tougher matchup than the Browns, but Kyle Shanahan and the Niners can run the ball, and they don't have Kyle Juszczyk, but he did get hurt at the end of that game. So we'll see if they can continue to give Chris some points. I do think Odell Beckham, man. I got him in another league, Brett. Struggling what to do with him. I picked him over some other high-profile wide receivers. You watch guys like Michael Thomas and Keenan Allen. These guys are getting a lot of points. Keenan not much last week, but just in general, Beckham has not been good. I'm going to click on his name right here. He is the 35th ranked wide receiver on the season in points per game, or total points for the fantasy season through the year here. Not good. And Baker looks lost. So I think Odell's going to have a better game this week at home against Seattle, but it all starts with that offensive line. Good news for Brett. He does get Le'Veon Bell, who's been struggling with the backup quarterback. Darnold's back this week. I don't know if Darnold's going to shake up all the rust here in 1 week, but he's trending in the right direction. Let's put it that way. And Amari Cooper, talk about a guy. Beckham hasn't been performing. Cooper's the number 3 wide receiver on the year, and he's just been helping his team a lot. obviously. And a wide receiver 3, Brett's searching a little bit. He does have Gordon. He is the 44th wide receiver on the year, so, he's still hoping for some better performances from him. And Philip Lindsay has been great. Also, last week he was great. So, Chris, he rides or dies with Mahomes. Last couple weeks he hasn't done anything. He's a number 3 quarterback on the year. Brett has the number 1 quarterback on the year in Russell Wilson. I wasn't a big fan of Russell Wilson this year because I thought they were going to run the ball more. It doesn't matter. He's awesome. He's ridiculous. He's a great quarterback. Listen, Chris, you haven't been winning. You're 1-4. Your team is better than 1-4. I really stick by that. I told you in the beginning of the year I thought your draft was really good. It hasn't panned out. Barkley got hurt. Mahomes last 2 weeks, like I said, haven't been great. Mike Evans could have 50 or he could have 0 like he did last week. So I'm going to go with Brett. Your team's been more consistent than Chris's. You scored a ton of points last week and lost. I'm going to go with Brett to right the ship. For my own personal benefit, I hope Chris wins, but I'm going to take eating W's here in week 6. Moving on to the next matchup, we have PP versus Kev. I debated making this the matchup of the week, but I have another one saved for later. So PP and Kev, like I said, PP's been playing the quarterback roulette. This week he's turning his faith and his team's hands into Minshew Mania at home against New Orleans. Gardner Minshew is the 11th ranked quarterback on the season. And, looking at his numbers, the least amount of points he's had on the season is 13. It's a lot better than -4 that Pearson got last week. So hopefully he'll continue things with DJ Chark and Westbrook and some of the other guys there. Gurley's been better. Played like 95% of snaps last week. Fringe RB1, RB2, he might be getting his groove back. Freeman, 24th running back on the year. I thought he'd actually be worse than that. Pearson wants to hopefully get more out of him. And look, wide receivers. Hopkins, kind of go down the list. He's the 18th wide receiver on the year. Obviously drafted him in the first round to be better than that. And then he's got DJ Moore and Emmanuel Sanders, who are 36 and 25 respectively. So a couple dart throws there at wide receiver right now. He also has Mike Williams in his lineup, who is the 64th wide receiver on the year. So he's hoping to get some points out of him with Marlon Mack and Tyrell Williams on bye. Don't look now, but everybody said, hey, Kev, especially Otley said, hey, Kev, I don't know about your trades. You're trading a lot away. 1-2 in a row. Beat Otley. Right now, he's projected to lose by 9 to Pearson. He's got Carson Wentz, tough matchup against Minnesota. He's got Melvin Gordon, who should hopefully get some more carries now. After last week, he was dipping his toe in the water. Damian Williams is healthy. He looked like the guy in Kansas City last week. Godwin is the number 1 ranked wide receiver on the year. Holy crap, Godwin. So Kev's team's looking up. He actually also might get Tyreek Hill back this week. I'm going to go with Kevin to win this game. I think that his team is on the rise. I think Pearson, still waiting for Breeze to get back. And with Marlon Mack, arguably his best player so far on the season, is out. I do think Hopkins is going to have a good week. But I've been saying that every week, so I got to see it first. I'm going to take Kevin to beat Pearson in week 6. Moving on to the next matchup, I have the matchup of the week. Otley versus Terry, the battle of the brother-in-laws, okay? Kyler for Terry has been pretty good. He runs, which gives him points, and he's home this week against Atlanta. Terry also, has Cooper Kupp, who I was a little worried about the ACL. He leads the league in targets after the first, since week 2, and he's the second-rated wide receiver on the season. He's been amazing. He puts him with Will Fuller, who had the best wide receiver performance I think I heard in the last 8 years or something at the wide receiver position. I think since Brandon Marshall caught like 27 balls or 21 balls. So Terry's team's on the up. He's got Nick Chubb and Ezekiel Elliott. Find a better running back duo in this league than those two. They might both be top 5. Zeke's got the Jets. If Diggs can get it figured out against a leaky Philadelphia secondary, Terry, watch out. He could be on the rise. As for Otley, a loss last week. 1 and I think actually 0-2. Should I check my sources on that? He is on a losing streak of 2. After starting 3-0, he was on the podcast week 3, said he was going to beat Dean. He beat Dean, lost 2 in a row since then. He still has Brady. Brady had a good week last week. He's been good. Kamara, been good. He's the 9th-rated running back on the year. Last week he had 13. The week before he had 9.5. Not what you wanted, but he's still been good. Ingram's been good as well, but Lamar Jackson's been a little bit shaky since his start. Thielen, squeaky wheel, got the grease last week. Then you got guys like Golden Tate, Chris Thompson in his lineup. Travis Kelce, number 4 tight end on the year. He, in my book, if the draft was today, I'd still take him probably where you took him. I think he's the number 1 tight end going forward, but he hasn't paid dividends. Otley's projected to win by 11. I'm going Terry. Otley's on a losing streak. Terry needs to win more at 2-3. I just think, and you know, he has Terry 643 points scored on the year. Otley 620. Am I reading that right? Yes. He actually has more points than Otley. I'm going to go Terry to pull off, I guess, sort of an upset here in Week 6. Moving on to the next matchup. Dean versus Jake. Battle of the Hardings. Dean does not go down easy. He's 1-4, but he's got a ton of points. Last week he beat Pearson. The week before, 2 weeks ago, Otley beat him. He scored 1,000,000 points. So Dean's team on the rise. One thing to note, he's got David Johnson. He's got a bad back. Brett went on a free agent wire, paid up for Edmonds, knowing that he could be an asset to his team if David Johnson misses. So that would be a big loss for Dean. But what I'm seeing right now is that David Johnson's going to play at home against Atlanta. I think he has a nice week. Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback, 19 on the season. You paid up for him. And he has not been what you hoped he would be. At home against Detroit, they're not going to run 4 touchdowns in every game. Aaron Jones had a great game last week. I think Rodgers might get it right this week. And Allen's due for a bounce back, Keenan Allen, after he had 18 yards last week. Tyler Lockett, what can you say? He's been good. 10th wide receiver on the year. Alshon's kind of been hit or miss. Jake on the other side, model of consistency. Number 1 point scorer in the league, at top of the standings. He's got Christian McCaffrey. That's a big reason why. He's got Sony Michel. I think Sony Michel has a monster night on Thursday Night Football. He's been very tough as an owner. I have him in another league to have and start on your team. But at the Giants, at home, the Giants are decimated. I like Sony Michel. But Jake's wide receivers are a question mark. Sutton, he's been good. He had 1 long touchdown last week and nothing else. Gallup has been his best wide receiver. He will continue to be good opposite of Amari Cooper. But Juju Smith-Schuster, he's got a different quarterback every week. Duck Hodges this week. I mean, you know, his ceiling of where you picked him to be top wide receiver is obviously out the window. Can he sustain wide receiver 2 numbers? I don't know. Jake doesn't have a wide receiver 1. He's relying on those guys and guys like Jarvis Landry and Mohamed Sanu as well. That might be Jake's Achilles heel. But again, with Sony, McCaffrey, and acquiring Fournette from Kevin, also he has Eckler on the bench. His running backs, depth-wise, are hard to compete against. I want to go out on a limb and take Dean in this one. I really do. I'm going to do it. Dean. I have written down Jake. I need Jake to lose. Dean's team is better than what's on paper. I'm going to go with my dad to bring down my brother, Harding Sr., over little Jakey here in Week 6. And lastly, my matchup versus Zach. Zach, he is all over the place. He's scored 3 weeks. He's had less than 105 points. 2 of those weeks he was in the 90s. The 1 week he had 105 exactly. The other 2 weeks he scored 174 and 184. He's either getting you fringe weekly values here or he's going balls to the wall and scoring the most points in the league. That is good for second points in the league so far, even though he's been, standard deviation. Brett, I know you remember that from statistics class. His standard deviation's low, but his point total is high. So Zach's team is scary. He's got a lot of guys that can put up big points. He's projected 127. I think that's the most of any team this week, and it is. I just did a quick scroll through. Jake's second at 124. Connor, with no Samuels, he should be fine. Aaron Jones, 4 touchdowns last week. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But he, is somebody that can do that, especially with Jamal Williams still not on the field. Julio Jones, 2 down weeks at home at Arizona. I think this is a get-right week for Julio, having another league. Probably good for 100 and a touch. And Tyler Boyd in Cincinnati, he's been good too. He's the number 13 wide receiver on the year. DJ Shark, he's the 5th wide receiver on the year. So Zach has some firepower. Right now he's got Watson in his lineup. He also has Lamar Jackson. Pick your poison. Tough to bench Watson, I guess, after last week when he scored 48 points. Week before he had 8. Week before he had 27. maybe he's part of Zach's conundrum here of scoring a ton or scoring none, or a little bit. So he's got a good team. He's got Kerryon back from bye this week too. Him and Aaron Jones playing Monday night is not ideal. I could be up 30, 40 and lose Monday night potentially. But look, I got Goff. He's throwing the ball a ton. When they get down the end zone, he's been handing it off. I need to hope some of those get punched in for scores. Dalvin Cook's been great. Very tough matchup against the Philly run defense this week's going to be tough. Chris Carson, I love this guy. He had some fumbling issues. I think he's got it figured out. He gets a ton of work. He's at Cleveland. You just saw what the Niners did to Cleveland. Like him better usually at home. But you got Fitz. He's been pretty decent. 15th wide receiver ranked on the year. Galladay's 23rd. He didn't play last week because of bye, so he's been good. Evan Ingram's out, so I'm turning to Gerald Everett. And right now my flex is Adrian Peterson against the Dolphins. Picked him up for $1. Might throw him in the lineup. Don't really know. Zach, I'm picking myself to win. I don't feel great about it. I'll be honest with you. Olong Johnson might have the edge on me this week, but I'm picking myself. Couple upsets this week. Listen, guys, I'm going to Minnesota. I won't be able to see the 1 o'clock games. Hopefully I'll be at the bar celebrating at 4 o'clock, watching the rest of the games. Listen, guys, commish out. Enjoy this week. We'll talk next week.